Okay, hi and welcome back everyone to another video in this ongoing series called Going Modular. In this particular video, I'm calling the focus One and Done, and I'm really trying to get to the bottom of the issue of whether or not when you're building your Eurorack modular system, you can almost buy a module or maybe two modules that will eliminate the need to buy other modules in that category. And so I think in this video the focus is on some practical issues in terms of things like price and the space and availability of space within your case or cases, and also to what extent one module or two modules of a particular category can do everything for you in terms of some of your needs, sonically, functionally, in terms of control voltage, sequencing, triggering, and so forth. So the first thing I should say about my case, and let me turn the camera here so you can see it a little better. What I would say first off is that I've made some changes here that maybe are noticeable. So in the space over here, I used to have a Model D, a Behringer, and I actually ended up selling that and picked up a Folktech Mescaline on reverb.com. And so I will hopefully be featuring this in some new videos. I actually did a couple of new videos where you can hear some of the sounds, and I absolutely love it in terms of not just the sounds but also using it as a master clock, which probably seems unnecessary in my system because I have so many possible clock sources, but I'll get to some of that later. I should probably turn on this case as well in case I end up using it. So I now have this space, and I changed up some of my shelving to accommodate it, and I was just recording some experiments last night using that as a clock source into my tip-top audio case here. Another thing I did was I took out most of my modules in this smaller case to the side, which is a handmade case using the Tip-Top Happy Endings kit. And so I currently just have a few modules in this one, and I'm still trying to decide what to do with this. I reworked this whole case, and using my erogenous tones modules, I basically had these set up here where I have my mixer, my VCAs, and my envelopes, and my blip module. I decided to put my triggers here because I use those a lot, and I moved my Hermit sequencer, which was originally in this case. I put it here because I figured it's going to be closer to a lot of the things I'm going to be triggering, and I thought strategically to put a lot of my sound sources here in this case, including the Platts, Planck, and my mutable clone down here, which is a resonator, and it's a sound source and also an effects unit basically, and intersperse some smaller units here, small reverb, a couple of clock utility modules, my quantizer, my random module, which is pretty helpful for doing rhythmic things and adding interesting elements to some compositions. Try to put all my clock sources down here. If they didn't fit, I stuck some of them up here. I put maths in here as well. This new really cool shard module, and I just realized, oh, that's actually kind of funny. So this would be a good blooper. I don't know if you can see it, but this is actually upside down. So the other night I was putting my case together, and I was just putting things in, and that's pretty funny. So I could still use it, but I think it's going to be easier for me to flip that orientation around. This case is still in the works. I have clouds up here, which was like, I think my original, like my first module that I ended up purchasing. And then I have my Folktech conduit and resist here because my idea is I'll play this off of using the DuPont stuff from the Mescaline. And again, the Mescaline for me has been just such a revolutionary tool to use. I got it used on Reverb, and I wanted it because I thought it sounded so unique, particularly in terms of the drum sounds and just the unpredictability and the fact that there are so many different things that it can do that almost challenge your abilities to control it, which I really love in terms of musical experiments of those cats like John Cage and others going back many, many years, post 60s and so forth. So I mention this because part of this change in the case was because of one module that I just picked up, and that is the Rossum assimilator, which is a really amazing sampler module. So the deal on this was, in my cases I had two samplers before. I had the Tip-Top 1, which is a really amazing, if you want to do like percussive sampling and triggering It's a great module. I mean, it's really efficient, small size. It does a lot with the different modes that you can use to trigger your samples, and it's relatively cheap. So it's a great module. I ended up selling that on Reverb to pay for some of this stuff, and I also currently have up there, which I haven't sold yet, my radio music sampler, which is really amazing. If you're looking for a sampler, I would almost say, and you're not just doing percussion, you want to do ambient, experimental noise experiments with all sorts of found sound sources. That's a great module to use for sampling because of what you can do with triggering it in so many experimental ways. You can also load in alternative firmware, which allows you to do the chord organ, which is a really cool module as well. Depending on the price on that, I may not end up selling it. Well, we'll have to see. I always think like I get to a certain point, and if it's too low of a price, I don't want to part with it, I might hold on to it. But I really wanted to do something much different with my sampling. So I ended up lucking on Reverb. I got this in incredible condition. One of the guys, you can always look at their ratings and what they've sold. He sells gear kind of like me to buy new gear, and that's really what I was doing. So sold the Model D to help pay for the mescaline, and then I sold a few things in addition to that to pay for the assimilator sampler. The thing lists for, I think, $8.99, which for me was really breaking the bank. I got it for $250 below that, so I thought it was an absolute steal to get it. And basically, I just kept lucking. I had my Reverb notification on my watch list, and I just waited and waited, and finally one came up at a really great price, and so I just had to get it. And I've been so pleased with it, and I'm going to feature some of the sounds in this demo. So this particular module is, I think, particularly innovative, and it's basically an 8-channel sampler. It's multi-timbral. It has 24 CV points going in to adapt and modify your sounds. Just about anything on the module can be CV controllable, so that is absolutely amazing. It has phase modulation, which I'm still getting into and trying to understand, but it's pretty amazing in terms of some of the sounds. And what I've discovered that is basically I can use this as a one and done module for all my sampling. So I'm kind of declaring today that this is the only sample module I'm ever going to purchase. Again, I had some others in the past. I really thought about it carefully, and I said if I want to do sampling, if I want to use it for percussion, which is one of my main interest points with this particular setup, then I really need a module like this. In fact, I've currently used, I think, 4 channels of it and haven't found a need to use 8. It has assignable, you can take 8 outs. It also has combined stereo outs. You can do CV control of panning, so it really does get into the CV realm and modules. And some of my other videos I mentioned that there's not a lot of CV sometimes in your Eurorack setup, although you have modules like clouds or elements or others that allow you to do this. There's a new make noise module out there that looks pretty cool, stereo filter module that looks really amazing in that regard. So this checked a lot of boxes for me when I really thought about it, and based on the quality of what I was getting with my percussion samples in the tip-top module, and this one's even higher resolution in terms of the sampling ability. I doubt I'll use it to that potential, but just really amazing opportunities to expand and use it as a voice among many in my system. The other thing you're going to note is that because it's 8 channels, all of my other erogenous tone modules are 8 channels. So it gives me the opportunity to very quickly go across in a linear sense, use my envelopes back here, or plug these outs into my VCAs and then those envelopes into there and then into the mix out, control that how I want. It gives me a lot of power in terms of mixing. And everyone jokes about you can never have too many VCAs, but I think with 8 channels of sound, of envelopes, of VCAs, of mix outs, it's going to be hard to use all those up. And then of course I have my mixer as well, which I typically do a lot of submixing. In the video today I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to take a stereo out to create the sounds in the video today. So that was a justification of getting the module, and I thought, as I was saying with the Tip-Top 1, if that module is making such great sounds, and you could say for the price you could get, it wouldn't make sense, it would take up a lot of HP, but you could get 4 Tip-Top 1s maybe for around $400. It's still going to be cheaper than the assimilator, but you're not going to have as much CV control. There's one CV input there. There are 4 different modes that you can use. There's a trigger input, but it's not going to get you anywhere near what you can do with the assimilator in terms of all the CV potential of control. You can also sample directly in stereo within the module. I haven't done that yet. You can sample control voltage signals. I'm going to try that at some point and then play those out to control other modules. So it really does a lot more than just sampling, and that's one of the cool things about a lot of sample modules is you can use it to record and capture and then send back out CV signals, audio signals, of course. So I think it has potential in that sense. Now, what I'm suggesting in this video is that because I have this one module, that's going to check the box on my sample category, if you will, my sample checklist. So I don't know how you do this if you go on Modular Grid, if you diagram this out. I didn't really think about my case and my modules when I first got into Eurorack in an efficient or logical manner. And I think what I did was, again, I started with clouds, and then I jumped into some of the Bastel solenoid and DC motor modules, and the modules like ears that gave me possibilities to use piezos along with my field kit box. I wanted to do stuff with solenoids and electroacoustic. As I started to expand, it was like, oh, I need sound sources. Oh, I need VCAs. I need envelopes. And so things kind of logically fit into place. And then strategically, I started thinking about sequencing and also interfacing with MIDI gear. So I got the Hermid for that as a result of just thinking logically about how to interface. Although now with the Model D, in the mail on Reverb, I guess I won't have as many uses maybe for at least the MIDI out side of things. So we'll have to see how it goes in the future. Again, that constant buying and selling of gear, I think, gives you the potential to really custom craft a system and to think about it in a way, hopefully a little more logically than I did when I first started. As I started to build in my sound sources, it became clear, like with oscillators, with sound generators, with some of the physical modeling stuff, that I wouldn't necessarily have a one and done oscillator because there are just so many cool ones out there. There are new multi-core oscillators coming out. The Demon Core looks really cool. So those continually change, and sometimes you're like, well, I really want something different. I'll bring that one in and I'll sell something else. I currently have 2 of the Muskrats, and I originally, if you saw my drums video, was talking about using these for percussion. I'm going to see how it goes. I actually have a second one. I sold my 3rd one, and I do have the chipset. And because I have the chipset, I feel like I invested in the chips. They weren't super expensive, but I can change out the sounds a little bit. But what's really interesting is because I got the assimilator, some of the sounds on here, as well as, there's 4 CV control points plus the Muskrat one down here, but I have 24 possible CV ins on the assimilator, and with some of the sample libraries that I have with my drums, I can very easily probably create some of those sounds. So it's one of those like decisions, I think, down the road that I have to maybe think about. But as I have been building out the system, it became clear to me that so far, I have enough oscillators. I feel pretty good about my wave folder, which is the tip-top fold processor. Maths is super useful. And then devices like clouds for effects, some of my smaller effect units, the delay. I feel pretty good about those right now. I can do a lot of effects in post-production, which I don't think is as fun and organic as doing it live, but I feel pretty good about that. Feel great about my clock sources. Love my resonator, love the mutable elements. I'm still thinking about maybe getting a small clone of rings just because it's like elements, but it does a few things very differently. So for me, the one category I needed to think about was sampling. I thought, what can I do to really up my game a little bit in terms of my sampler that I have in my system, something that I would never outgrow. I don't think I would ever outgrow 8 channels. Now, could something come along in the future that have even more than this particular sampler or module? It could, but again, when you're getting something like this, you're almost, I was just looking at the Percussa, that SSP, which I don't think I would ever get. It looks amazing, but it almost like takes the function of your rack and puts it more into a mini computer model just in terms of the processing. So some of the modules out there I think are absolutely amazing in terms of what they can do and how they change just all the facets of what you're doing with your system, with your rack system. So I can see outgrowing the assimilator, but you never know. So for me right now, it is a one and done module. It totally fulfills what I need in my sample category. I don't need any other modules to do that, and I will call it good and basically check off that box and then go on to some other categories. I would also say that about my VCAs and my envelopes. So I feel good that the system is evolving in such a way that I don't necessarily have to think about in the future dealing with my samples other than with this one module. It's pretty big in terms of HP, but I think it's well worth it. And let me actually turn the camera. I realized I had the camera this way, so let's flip around here. In terms of its size, as you can see, it takes up a lot of space in the case. And so it's big, but it has a lot of bang for its buck. It's built amazing. I mean, it's one of these modules that when you look at it, I mean, it's metal, the dials, all the buttons are amazing. And it's one of those modules, I think, that will absolutely last, the test of time in terms of my system. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you a few of the features of the module, and I think I'll just play through some stuff. Probably put the camera maybe back there. I have to think about how I want to do this, but I think I'll incorporate it, since I have this setup going, I'll incorporate it with the mescaline, the folk tech. And this particular song I was working on, or experiment, I'm using 3 or 4 channels of samples from the sampler. I'm doing a little bit with maths up top, and maths is actually, in a sense, mellowing the tone. I have it going into a convert input, and then that's going out with a DuPont cable into the oscillator of the drum module on the Folktech mescaline. So I'm using it to almost mellow some of the timbres and tones of what's coming out of the drum. And then I also have some other things going on here. I'm using the Folktech mescaline as my main clock source with a splitter, and then I'm taking that main source and using it on my 2 Pico Trig modules, which I absolutely love. I'm not using the Hermit this go around. And then I'm also incorporating Turing Machine and a couple other modules that are giving me rhythmic randomization, still keeping in time with the clock of the mescaline. You're also going to hear the drone module from the mescaline playing along, and I may bring in something from Planck, like a dark ride bell, and maybe put that through some reverb. So what I want to suggest about the assimilator, what I find so cool about this module in terms of it being a category finisher for me in terms of sampling, is I was able to go back through a lot of my drum VST libraries on the computer, and using like a little routine I set up in Logic, I was able to sample those, because a lot of Logic files are, native instrument files are not in WAV format, and this reads WAV format. It doesn't matter what you name them. When you get into some samplers, you're going to discover very quickly that they often, I had a Bastel module which I sold, there were all these conventions you had to do with naming the samples. What I like about this one is, as long as they're WAV files, it doesn't matter what they're named. They can be, any quality in terms of this sample rate. They can be mono or stereo, whatever. And as long as you have room for it, you can store up to, I think it's 400, almost 450 gigs internally in the memory. And then you can use all the mini SD cards to your heart's delight. This is a 256 one, and I've barely filled it up, and I've put over 100 different sample libraries. So I've been sampling from, again, my VSTs, putting those in as sample kits and loading those in, and I'll do that today. And I've been focusing more on the experimental kits. And also today I discovered online one of the many free drum libraries. This particular one has literally every drum machine you could ever imagine, all the Roland classic ones, Alesis, like the HR series, the SR series, and toy drum machines and so forth. And a lot of those sounds are absolutely stellar. And what I'm trying to do in recent or in compositions coming up is to pair some of the sounds here, like clicky little percussive sounds, we're not talking any 808 kind of, kicks or snares, nothing like that. I want it to pair with the mescaline in terms of those clicky percussion sounds to see if I can get a groove going with this and that, and also using the CV with panning from my envelope generator and so forth. So I'll take you through some of these experiments and we'll kind of just go through again. It's not going to be a great mix. I'm just going to dump this all into the mixer right now in stereo, but let's see what we come up with in terms of an experiment using here the assimilator from Rossum. All right, so that's going to do it for this installment of Going Modular. Again, the focus today was on the idea of one and done, to think about whether you can get to a point in your Eurorack setup, in your modular setup, such that you can check off one of those categories of modules because maybe you acquire a module or two that really does it for you in terms of that category. So I hope you enjoyed this feature today, and please check out upcoming video features and musical experiments here on my YouTube channel, and check out the additional videos here in Going Modular.